Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Impactivity Talking Without Limits podcast, a conversation with. I am very excited today because this is the first ever episode on the podcast. I am joined today by Sophie Marsh from Sophie's Stories. Sophie, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, really good. Thank you.
Hey,
Good to
well,
be here.
thank you for joining me on the first ever episode. So, little introduction about Sophie. So, she's worked in mental health for the last 10 years, including roles with the Samaritans and other psychiatric settings. Now working as a creative therapist for children and young people, as well as starting, and now this is like the big one, I think this is like when everyone comes and we get 1 million followers, the founder of Sophie's Stories and the author behind the hit novel. Can we say that? The hit novel?
I
Yeah,
mean, you can say that.
I am going to say that. I'm wanting your book sales to go up because of this. So the author of the novel, The Stay-at-Home Superheroes, which has been translated into 20 different languages and is helping now to empower others to write their own stories and, as a method of, promoting mental health. So, I mean, I've sold that and you've got 20 different languages. That's what this podcast is going to aim for. Now I'm going to throw it over to you and you get to sell yourself now. So hit me with it. What's your story? How have you got from working and volunteering with the Samaritans all the way to published author?
Thank you. I think you summed that up pretty nicely.
Thank you.
I've always been interested. I did, psychology at uni. I've always had that sort of drive to help people, and that's just evolved as I've gone on. So, yeah, I started volunteering at the Samaritans while I was at university, and then started working in the community, supporting people with mental health. Worked in, inpatient hospital settings as well. Then moved on to family work and supporting families with wellbeing. Found out that I really loved working with children. That was my passion. So I moved into playing creative therapies with children and with young people, which is the majority of my work now, my sort of one-to-one work.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, part of that is, or a lot of what I do also is obviously the stories and story writing. That's something that I use a lot, and lots of therapists who work with children use stories and books to help kids with mental health and to help with sort of finding ways to introduce and talk about things that are really difficult to talk about, for adults, never mind for children.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've always loved creative writing. I've been a writer since I was little, so it's something that I've sort of combined my love of supporting people and working with kids, and then my love of writing stories. So I kind of mold the two together, and now I write what we call therapeutic stories, so stories for children that have a message of some kind that kind of embeds support and ways to help kids with all sorts of different things. So
it's awesome, and like you said, I think it's so important what you're doing, because obviously looking from my perspective, all I'm looking at is sports. So hearing from someone who is working in a completely different field, it's going to be really interesting. You've got so many questions to answer this afternoon. So let's talk about. So let's talk about your work with the Samaritans. How did you get into that, and what was your role when you first got there, and how did that evolve over the time you were there?
Yeah, so my role with the Samaritans, I started, like I said, when I was at university, and it was just I wanted to do something to kind of give back. I wanted to sort of learn some more, essentially it's soft counselling skills at Samaritans, at least when I was there. It's a listening service, it's not counselling, but it was, it's for those who aren't aware, it's a helpline that's available 24 hours a day, that anyone can call up if they're feeling low, if they're struggling, they need someone to speak to. And my job there as a volunteer was to listen and to hold space, to not have any judgment, to not try and sort of push anyone to feel better or to give advice and things like that, but just to be a space to be listened to, which I think is a really rare thing, actually. It's natural. We all kind of, someone comes to us with a problem and we want to give solutions, we want to fix it, we want to help people feel better, and of course we do, but sometimes I think one of the best things we can do is just to listen. And that was what my role at the Samaritans really was all about at that time.
100%. I think that's so important. I've noticed that a lot when people automatically, because of the roles we're in, immediately think we're going to jump in with right, here's how it's solved, here's your issue, this is all done. Whereas like for people like me, for you, like listening is probably our number one skill, because we've got to take everything on board ourselves. So I think that's really important. And obviously with the Samaritans, it's, you know, listening is the most important thing, especially because some people have never been listened to, and some people don't even know how to talk as well. So you need that like understanding ear, I guess, to you know, take that on board. So like, do you believe like that work with the Samaritans, is that something that has benefited your skills to where they are today? And is that something that like really cemented like where you wanted to go with your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I credit the Samaritans really, and the training that they give you as a volunteer is incredible. It's a really intense, long process that you go through learning how to support people in the way that they do. And yeah, that really has like formed the basis of how I've always then worked, whether it's with adults or children.
Yeah.
The core of my work is just to listen and to just give people permission to be however they are, however they're feeling, not try and rush people out of their feelings, not try and convince them that they shouldn't be feeling that way. And again, it's often well-meaning, isn't it? We're like, oh, how can we help?
100%.
What do we say to like make this better? And sometimes you can't. And even when you can, maybe you have got some great ideas and some great support. And, you know, I've got lots more skills now that can help people. But if you don't have that first, you don't have that foundation of listening to someone tell their story and talk about how they're feeling, you're not really going to get anywhere. You have to have that first, I think. So yeah, it definitely has like been the foundation for me.
And did you say you was doing that volunteering role whilst you were studying at university, or was that something that
Yeah.
encouraged you to go into studying?
Yeah, no, that was while I was studying. So while I was at university, I started in my first year and stayed with them through my studies.
Nice. So what was it that you did actually study at university?
I did psychology at university, and well, psychology was my major, and I minored in Spanish because I couldn't choose. So I did a little bit of Spanish while I was there as well.
There we go. Just a note to listeners: we will not be translating this into Spanish at any point today. So
glad to hear it.
Yeah, no, I'd crack under pressure. I've got like hello, and that's it. So like, obviously, you've gone from psychology, like you were studying that at university, and obviously working with Samaritans. How did you find that transition, or how did the transition come about to like focusing in on creative therapy? So like, what was your decision making behind going from psychology into the creative therapy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think part of it, like I said, was wanting to work with children and young people, realizing that's something that I really, really enjoyed and loved doing.
Yeah.
And so naturally, when you're working with children, young people, they often don't have the words to be able to talk through what's bothering them or what's happened in their lives. Or they don't have it's not their natural way to communicate, to sit and talk. You know, they want to play, they want to create, and that's how I then learned to get on their level and to use, you know, how they naturally communicate in order to sort of support them. And yeah, I think it's also, you know, like you said, like a lot of people don't know how to listen, but a lot of people don't know how to talk. We're often, and when things are really, really difficult, if we're talking about trauma, if we're talking about mental health, if we're talking about the things that are really deep and difficult, finding words sometimes can feel almost impossible. You know, physically saying them, even if you have them, saying them out loud can feel so difficult for so many people, no matter what age you are. And so being able to find other ways, creative ways to express yourself, you know, whether that's art or music or writing or whatever it might be, that can really help people. They don't have to say it out loud. They can find a way that feels most comfortable for them. They don't have to sit and tell me. They can sit and show me. You know, there's other ways, and that can be really, really helpful. And that's something that I love, that, you know, I mean, I'm a writer. I obviously rely on words. I love words, but we don't have to use words. And sometimes, especially with trauma, and that's a lot of my work is trauma based, and often, you know, trauma isn't stored in our memories in words. It's pictures, it's sensations, it's feelings, it's messy. It doesn't have this nice clear, you know, A to B.
Of course,
to go with it. So so using creative therapies in that instance, I think is kind of necessary. You know, sometimes there's not another way. So
that like brings up like a couple of things for me. So like, obviously from my personal perspective, when I was growing up, I was given this, you know, big man, you're the shoulder to cry on sort of stereotype. That's what I was told to do. And this is from a young age. So, and that led to me going into adulthood without the ability, I guess, to open up and talk. So my first question, and then we'll go back again, is creative therapy something that, you know, obviously now I'm through, you know, I'm recovering from my problems and I'm putting this podcast out here, so clearly I can talk, but there's some people out there who, you know, haven't got this platform or aren't confident with that. So is creative therapy something that can be adapted to people who are older, who may be in a situation where they feel like they can't talk and would rather go down that route, or is that just something that is focused on younger people?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think creative therapies is for any age if people are open to it, you know, and it's not for everybody. Some people would rather, you know, maybe not even go to therapy at all, maybe speak, they've got supportive friends or family or colleagues, and that works for them. Or perhaps, you know, they're more than happy to sit and to talk things through, and they don't want to do anything creative. That's not for them, and that's fine. But for people who have maybe a bit of a curiosity there, or who are naturally creative, or who would like to explore something where they don't have to sit and talk necessarily, yeah, creative therapies can be helpful for any age whatsoever. There's no like upper limit for that at all.
Yeah. Do you tend to find that obviously through like the creative things, so the stories, everything like that, conversations start to happen, you know, a little bit more naturally? So is that the idea behind it?
Not necessarily. Sometimes I think this is the thing, especially with children, but it can be for adults too, that is great about using different creative tools in the therapy setting, is that you don't need words. So somebody could come, you know, for however many sessions with a creative therapist like me, and wouldn't necessarily have to tell me anything. We wouldn't necessarily have to talk much at all, and they could get a lot from that, from expressing themselves in a different way and from doing a lot sort of internally. But equally, a lot of people, especially adults, will find that as time goes on and they're creating and they're expressing themselves in different ways, that they will naturally be able to then open up a bit more and to speak, and that confidence can grow slowly, and that, yeah, it can kind of open the door to talk about things in a different way. Because again, when we're speaking, it's our logical brain. It's our, like, the left side of our brain. It's everything that is logical thinking.
Yeah, of course.
And when we're using something creative, when we're not using words, that goes into the creative side of our brain, the other side of our brain, and we're able to access things that are maybe we're not conscious of, that aren't logical thoughts, and feelings aren't logical quite often, you know. They're just there, and we can't say why. It's something that's kind of in our body, it's something that's sort of under the surface, that's subconscious. And so when we use creative stuff, that helps that stuff come to the surface, and then you can look at it and be like, what's that about? And then use the sort of logical brain to interpret it and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, actually, I can see how those things link. Or so yeah, creative therapy can kind of join the two parts of your brain and sort of work with the conscious and the subconscious, and bring together the logic and the feelings, which I think is a really powerful thing to be able to do.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's like so important, and seeing like so many different pathways for people to help get support with their mental health. So obviously with me coming from a sporting background and using sport as the tool, I think we're sort of in the same boat. I use my sessions. If no one comes and talks to me at the end of the session, but they're still coming back week in, week out, or whenever I do them, they're clearly getting something out of it. And the same with the workshops that I do. And so I really do think that is important to stress, that there are other ways of, you know, coping with your mental health. Like, don't get me wrong, talking is a massive thing, but like you said, there's other ways of coming to that point, rather than just going straight down like the talking therapy. Like there's sport, there's your creative therapy, where you're playing to your own strengths to make yourself feel comfortable. So like with that in mind, do you think that I was speaking to a few people at a few workshops about accessibility with, you know, different therapies and stuff. One, do you think that like creative therapy is accessible for as many people as it should be? And do you believe it should be encouraged more? So for example, in school settings, I know people obviously do arts and different creative, you know, things on the curriculum, but do you think it should be encouraged more as a form of therapy or something that people can do to, you know, I guess find their place of peace?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Find their place of peace. That's beautiful. Yeah, I think for sure. I think, you know, I'm sure you've seen it. It's the same with sport and with the arts. They're not valued within educational settings really as they should be, I don't think. They're not funded in the way that they used to be, and the emphasis isn't there, and that's such a shame for so many reasons, because those those kind of activities are so important for so many reasons. And yeah, I do think it should be something that more of an emphasis is placed on. You know, I go into schools as a creative therapist, so it is out there and there is support there. But I think perhaps with adults, it's maybe not as common as it could be. Like lots of counsellors, you know, they work in a very in a they talk, and that's fine, and that's what works for a lot of people, and that's amazing. But I think it's important to have kind of different tricks up your sleeve, different tools in your toolkit, essentially, so that you can make sure that you're supporting the person in the way that that they need, and in the way that's best for them. And whether that's, you know, sport or art or talking or something completely different, it's making sure that people can access the support that they need at the time that they need it. And I think there's more that could be done for sure.
Yeah. So like with that in mind, obviously everyone knows we've had COVID for the last, it seems like about 10 years. It's been a while at this point. Do you think, because I've noticed now things are starting to return to normal, sport is being, you know, used and utilized in, I think, a very good way. And we've had loads of athletes coming out and talking about their own personal stories. My question is though, during lockdown, obviously everyone's locked indoors. Do you think, like, you know, are you seeing everyone doing their creative like things? Do you think that's something that was like people have come across like naturally, I guess, like finding their creative side? And then if so, like with kids that you're working with, are you finding a difference now you've gone back into schools when you're doing the therapy with them?
Yeah, that's interesting actually. I do think the lockdown, for a lot of people, obviously some people have had, you know, horrendous experiences of lockdown. We've all had, you know, huge stresses regardless, I think. But yeah, a lot of people did find, if they were lucky enough, you know, to be able to not have to be worried about health and finances and things like that, did find that, and they had the space, you know, if they weren't at work, if they were on furlough or whatever, they had space for, okay, what do I like? Like what's important to me? Like what do I want to do? How do I want to spend my time if, you know, suddenly they're off work? And so yeah, for a lot of people, I think creativity was part of that. And you know, having creative projects, things that you can do at home. You know, we're stuck indoors, what can you do from home? Maybe people, you know, pick up their knitting or like start painting or do whatever it is, you know. Start working on that novel that they've had in the back of their mind for the past like 20 years or whatever. So it gave people the space to do that. And that's the thing, you know, for creativity requires space. You know, it's not something that you can just like shove into, you know, 5 minutes in your lunch break when you've got this, that, and the other going on. It's something that you do need space for and time for. So yeah, I think a lot of people did find that they were kind of reconnecting with some creativity over lockdown. Personally, I haven't seen a difference in children in that sense, in terms of more or less, because a lot of children live in a creative world anyway. You know, that's their normal. I've seen a huge increase in anxiety in children post lockdown for sure. There's a lot of worry around, a lot of stress. But yeah, in terms of children's creativity, I haven't seen that difference. But I think with adults, there definitely a lot of people have reconnected or have found things that they enjoy, that are important to them over lockdown, which is lovely.
Yeah, and it's a brilliant segue. It's almost like I'm a good podcast presenter here. So obviously over lockdown, I believe it was the first lockdown, you obviously then go and create the stay-at-home superheroes. So tell me a bit about that. So tell me how it came about. Had that been something you'd wanted to do for ages? And like, just explain the success of it to everyone.
Yeah, I like that segue. That was good.
Hey.
Yeah, so yeah, obviously, what was it? March 2020. I had the news that we were going to be going into lockdown. I at that time had quite a busy case. I was going into lots of different schools and seeing lots of children who were having a really, really tough time. And, we had a week to try and prepare these children for what was about to happen.
Mhm.
They were losing, for a lot of them, school was their safe place. That was where they went to kind of escape maybe things that were difficult at home. And it was where they had access to other support and to therapy. So losing that for we don't know how long, and for a reason that was very scary and very confusing, and no one really understood what was going on, how bad it was, how bad it could be, how long it was going to. There were so many unanswered questions and so much anxiety around, and people were looking to schools and to teachers and to therapists like me to be like, what do we do? What do we say? How do we explain this to the kids? And so I was like, I have to do something here. I need to write something. So I decided to write a story to try and explain to the children what was going on and what was about to happen, and to try and make it something that, instead of, to kind of counteract all that fear and anxiety, I was like,
Mhm.
okay, how can I make this something that feels empowering, that gives them some kind of sense of control in a situation that is understandably very confusing and very scary? And also, how do I give parents and adults a way to talk to the children about this in a way
Mhm.
that is like child appropriate and child friendly? And so I came up with this idea of being a stay home superhero. So children sort of being given, or everyone being given this really important task to try and save the world by staying at home, and their superpower was staying at home and turning something really quite potentially very boring. I say potentially, we
Yeah.
know it was. We know it was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, turning something very boring into something exciting, that you're not just staying at home, you're saving
Hmm.
the world. Like, you're a
Yeah.
superhero. This is amazing. And that that's how we support all the doctor superheroes, and
Hmm.
everyone else who's working to fix the problem and to deal with COVID. So I wrote that very quickly. It was like really
Hmm.
important to me that I kind of got it out into the world as fast as I could, and shared it with the children as fast as I could, so that that could support them. And I think it was just because I managed to do it so quickly, and because it was such a time sensitive thing,
Hmm.
people really needed it. People didn't know what to say to children, and didn't know how to explain it, and didn't know how to make them feel better.
Hmm.
And then they came across this story and were like, oh, this, I have something. I can give them something now, rather than because we didn't have the answers as adults. We were
No.
confused. And so yeah, it caught on and was shared a lot around different school networks and on the internet, and the power of social media. Kind of, it was shared, and then eventually, sort of like you said, into lots of different languages all over the world. And it just kind of, yeah, took on its own momentum, which was a really amazing, amazing thing to be a part of, and to
Hmm.
to see unfold, and for me to have that positive focus over the lockdown as well was amazing. So
Yeah, I was
yeah.
just about to ask you, like, that must be incredible. Like, how does it feel, like, knowing that you've empowered so many people? Like, it must feel amazing.
Yeah, do you know what it's like? It's really emotional when I think back on it. And
Hmm.
it was a tough time for me, that just before the lockdown, there were lots
Hmm.
of things going on for me personally, and then had this huge change and shift, and it was very unsettling. And I couldn't do the job that I loved. I had to move homes. Like, there
Hmm.
was an awful lot going on. So for me to be able to have a positive impact in that way, I made
Hmm.
all these different connections with people all over the world, was having conversations with people all over the world, and knowing that I'd sort of helped to make things a little bit easier was huge for me. Like, that really did, I think, get me through those, and
Yeah.
especially that first 6 months or so, that was so challenging. Yeah, it was a really, really incredible project, and thing to be a part of.
Oh, I bet. So, like, going from that, so you've just released, the Stay Home Superheroes. You start working
Mm-hmm.
on like these workshops to empower other people to start writing their stories. So, do you want to tell us a little bit how that works, and maybe some of the success stories from that, and what the workshops entail, I guess?
Yeah, so initially the first thing I did from that was, people were coming to me, and I share lots of stories, through Sophie's stories. I share lots of books and stories for children, and lots of people were coming to me and messaging me and complimenting me. It was lovely,
Hmm.
but kind of putting themselves down while they were doing that. So they were
Yeah, yeah.
saying like, "Oh, like you're such an amazing writer. I wish I could write like you. I could never do that." Or, I love your stories. I'm rubbish at writing stories. I wish, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And it really made me think like, oh, I did something inside me. It was like, I don't think that's true. Like, I disagree. I think if we're all, I think, inherently creative, it's just how much we've sort of pushed it down or had it pushed down in
Yeah.
us. And I was like, if people have the desire to tell stories, if they would like to be creative in that way, then I think anybody can. We're all
Hmm.
storytellers in our own way. In conversations with friends and family, we're telling stories all the time.
Yeah.
It's just the way of doing it. And I was like, I think I could kind of create a formula for how to do this and share what I do, so that other people don't have to sit there and think, oh, I wish I could. They
Hmm.
could sit there and think, oh, I can. I'll do it in my way, in my voice, but I can tell stories too, and I can help children. I can help myself. So yeah, so I created a course to teach other people how to write the kind of stories that I do, these therapeutic stories, and shared that with lots of other therapists, with teachers, with parents, and pretty much at the end of every course, I'd always end up crying, like reading the stories that these people had
Yeah,
created.
yeah,
And yeah, seeing the process of people beginning with like, oh, I'm rubbish, like I'm no good, I can't write, to seeing them come out with something so beautiful that
yeah.
I
Hmm.
knew then was going to help other children was really powerful. And that, again, that ripple effect of seeing like, you know, it's not just me sharing stories, it's then all these other people who've now learned to do it for themselves, and they're going to be sharing stories with children. And yeah, that was amazing. And yeah, and it's kind of grown from there. And I've done workshops and courses around using storytelling and writing stories for your own, like not for another child, but for your own inner child. Like we all
Hmm.
have an inner child that, ourselves when we were younger, that often, lacked certain things or need certain things from us still. So using storytelling to kind of support that. Um, yeah, it's teaching other people how to use books with children to support conversations around mental health and emotional
Hmm.
health. And then more recently as well, I've been using creative writing to support, our personal healing for adults,
Hmm.
self-care, self-expression, that kind of thing, and have been, yeah, hosting those as well, which I love doing. So
Wow,
yeah,
no,
it's been
that's
busy. It's been a
incredible.
busy couple of years.
I was just gonna say, like with the whirlwind, whilst everyone's getting really
Yeah.
quiet, you've just like gone
Mm.
unbelievable, like levels. So, like,
Mhm.
why do you think, obviously, the creative writing is important and the creative therapy is important, but why do you think it seems so beneficial?
Why do I think what seems beneficial?
So, like, creative writing and creative therapy, why do you see it as so beneficial to people?
Um, so it's two things I think. One is like the writing itself, so writing not for
Mhm.
other people, but writing for yourself. And I think the benefits in that it can be huge. It's like
Mhm.
it's self-expression for a lot of people. Beginning with writing for yourself, just getting down thoughts and feelings on paper, not to share with anybody else initially, perhaps just for
Yeah.
yourself, can be really helpful to help people kind of um, like a catharsis, just getting it out. So it's not just in your head; it's on paper. It can help people to kind of organize their thoughts and feelings, to kind of make sense of them when it can feel really messy inside. If you getting something on paper can help you kind of find clarity and make links between like, oh, this is about this and this might be about this, and you can read it back and reflect on it. And for some people as well, it can be like a bit of a bridge into talking, that if
Hmm.
you kind of spend some time with yourself first, thinking through and writing about how you're feeling and what's going on, that it can then be this bridge into having that conversation with somebody else.
Hmm.
um, so yeah, writing can be really helpful in that respect. And then looking at more so for children, but it's the same for adults too, I suppose, with books and reading,
Hmm.
using books in terms of healing and supporting with mental health. When you read something, when you read a book, when you read a story, and you kind of connect with a character, or you connect with a storyline or a theme within that, and you see yourself in that character,
Hmm.
that in itself can be really powerful, because you're like, oh, it's not just me. Like, I don't,
Hmm.
it's not just
Yeah.
I'm not the only one. It's been written about. There's a character out there. There's an author out there who's written that. So
Hmm.
there's an understanding,
Yeah.
and yeah, it helps people to feel less alone. That they're like, oh no, it's other people have gone through something similar. Um, and again, it can be sometimes a bit of a bridge to talking about things, that you can talk about this book that you read rather than talking about yourself directly, or as a way to explain to family and friends, yeah, I'm reading this thing and it's kind of like what I'm going through, or
Yeah.
this feels similar, and with children, it's a way that, they can talk about the issues they're facing without having to talk about themselves. They can talk about the character in the story, but they're
Yeah.
still working through it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that can be really powerful in that respect, that it's a way of, yeah, feeling less alone, having a way to communicate and think about something sort of safely. And it's also, if you're starting this process of dealing with something difficult, and you find, whether it's a story, and again, it could be other kinds of art, it could be, movies, films, a TV series, anything where you
Hmm.
really connect to a character or a storyline, that, if you're in the middle of it and you don't really know how things get better, you don't know how to get out of the position that you're in, or the emotions that you're in, when you see a character sort of go through that journey, you see them get to the end of it. And
Hmm.
often, and hopefully, these stories have a positive ending, and you
Yeah.
kind of, it's like a roadmap, I say. It's like this way of watching someone else do it. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, if they felt like me at the beginning, they feel like this now. That's the journey
Yeah.
they went on. Maybe I can go on a similar journey. Maybe there's things in that might be helpful for me. So yeah, there's lots in it.
Yeah. I think that's so important. So just from like my journey, obviously when I first started getting help, started getting therapy, talking was not what I wanted to do. But I
Mm-hmm.
went through like journaling, the
Mm-hmm.
diary entries and stuff, and it started to help me, I guess, figure out the puzzle that was going on in my head, because it was coming out in all random different things at different times of the day. And it helped
Yeah.
me start to compartmentalize what was going on. So that was really good for me, the writing
Yeah.
side of it. And then in
Yeah.
terms of the reading, a big part of my recovery has just been escaping into books. And I think that's what it is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the time. The escapism, it gives you that half an hour or hour, like you said, associating with different characters or different
Mm-hmm.
storylines, and it does make you feel better. So I definitely agree with that, and I think it's so important to have those other things. I was saying on in different conversations, all I was ever used to was sport, so that was my
Mm-hmm.
escape, that was
Mm-hmm.
my hobby, that was everything.
Mm-hmm.
So when my depression and anxiety was starting to affect sport, I didn't have anything else to turn to.
Yeah.
So have it going back to what you're doing. I think it's so good to encourage that. Like you said earlier, a few people have got, everyone's creative, everyone's a
Mm-hmm.
storyteller, but it's pushed
Mm-hmm.
down in a lot of people. So it was so good and so refreshing to have something else to escape to. So now it's
Yeah.
not like I'm solely relying on sport.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I didn't even say that, did I? That, I'm focusing on like the therapeutic process, and
Mm-hmm.
processing the hard emotions, and like
Mm-hmm.
going and doing the hard work, right? And yeah, funnily, and this is typical of me, like forgetting the fun bit, and forgetting that, yeah, reading a book that's completely separate to what's going on in your life, or watching
Yeah.
a film, or doing whatever it is. And like you said,
Yeah.
that escapism,
Mm-hmm.
to be like, yeah, I'm gonna take a little break from my own thoughts and
Mm-hmm.
feelings for a moment, and go somewhere, go to a nice place, go to a different place, and kind of maybe be
Yeah.
inspired by something, or yeah, just take a break from it. And I think, yeah,
100%.
that's really important. Yeah,
Have you
there's
got any like top escapism books right now? Is there any like reading that you'd recommend
oh,
people to do? What's like your go-to?
do you know what? This is again typical me. I'm reading at the moment all kinds of like psychology related, yeah, more like books for work rather than books for fun. I have to try and remind myself sometimes, just read novels for fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's been a little while since I have. Yeah, I don't know if I've got any recommendations at the moment. That's my homework. I need to go and find a fun book to read.
Sorry to let you down, viewers. No recommendations. No recommendations today, but it's all good. It's all good. So we're nearly at the end of the podcast, but now it's time for the or like the viewers or listeners Q&A. So I've pre-prepared you with these because I didn't want to put you on the spot. See, I'm a nice podcast host. So we're going to fire away, just like go into whatever detail you want. And then at the end, we will talk about how people can get involved with Sophie's stories. And if they found this like really interesting, how they can get involved in your like workshops and stuff. Because I think that'd be incredible. If people, because not all people like sport and climbing up mountains, but they might like to read and write creatively. So we'll kick on with the Q&A. So are you ready for your first question?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Born ready. All right. Okay. So this is from Sean, and she says, what things do you do if your mental health is suffering, and does your writing also help you?
That's a really good question. I like that. Yeah, I think when my mental health is suffering, or when I know that I need some extra kind of self-care and support, there's lots of different things that I go to, and I think it's kind of like what you were saying. You don't want to have to rely on just one thing, because if that's taken away for whatever reason, you're then kind of lost. So I think over the years I've kind of added to my personal toolkit as well as adding to my therapy toolkit. And definitely exercise is one of those things. I think that's so important. It's obviously what you're all about, like getting moving when you can. And on days when maybe that feels really difficult, like if that's some really gentle yoga or just a really short, gentle walk, kind of listening to your body and listening to my body and thinking, okay, what do I need? But just getting moving sometimes, like shifting from that state is really, really helpful. On that note, like listening to my body, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that, I don't always take my own advice, but my best self would say that's what I do. That's what I try and do is listen to, okay, what am I feeling? Get curious about why that might be, and then think about, okay, so what do I need? What can I do for myself? And just listen to whatever that might be, and try and be compassionate about that, and try and think, okay, how can I best look after myself? And kind of treat myself like I would a friend. So we can be really hard on ourselves, right? Like we could say things to ourselves that we'd never say to a friend if they were struggling. Yeah. And so if I'm struggling, I try and think, okay, how would I support a friend in this moment? And to try and talk to myself like that, and to take care of myself physically, eating well, trying to move where I can, being like compassionate and gentle with myself. Writing definitely helps me. That's something I rely on pretty much on a daily basis. I journal a lot. Just getting my feelings out on paper and kind of making sense of things that way. You said you've got that puzzle in your head, and getting it down on paper can help you make sense of it like that. Gratitude again for journaling, keeping like a list of things that I'm grateful for, keeping a list of things that are good in my life. I think when we're feeling low, it can be really easy to lose sight of the good, and that not to kind of ignore that bad things are happening or that things are difficult. It's not like you're just sweeping under the carpet. It's kind of holding both, to be like, okay, this is really hard, and this is really difficult and painful, but also this, like there's two things happening here, and this is really difficult, but this is good. Like I do have this, and I can also acknowledge and focus and be grateful for the good stuff. So
I think that's really important to like acknowledge, is the fact that you can celebrate the small wins. Like sometimes the small wins are the most important things. So starting with my recovery, just like from my darkest moments, just getting out of bed and walking around the block was the best thing for me. But as it got progressively better, I'd be going on the 5Ks, going on 10Ks, and then I've ended up doing Snowdon and all these things. And I think that's really important going forward for people. You're not going to get this, I think it's realistic, to be honest with you, you're not going to get this big win straight away. No. It's a long-term process, but you can be okay with that. because you are going to get to
Absolutely.
that end goal. And I think
Yeah.
breaking it down into those small wins sometimes, like you've just said, oh, sometimes good food. Yeah, all right, I've cooked myself an amazing dinner tonight. Boom, there's your win for the day. And I think when you start breaking it down like that, it also becomes a lot easier to deal with, rather than seeing the long-term goal as, right, I'm going to be okay in a year's time. Forget that.
Yeah.
Sort
Yeah.
yourself
Yeah.
out for the day. And I think that is really important going forward, 100%. So are
Yeah,
you ready
for
for your
sure.
next question?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so we've touched on it a little bit today, but I think, we can go into a little bit more detail. So, can creative therapy work for all ages? So we've already established that, yes, it can work for all ages. But what Sam wants to know is, how can it be adapted? How is it adapted from different age groups, I guess?
Yeah, so I guess it depends what people are looking for, and the kind of, creative therapy is such a huge umbrella term, that could involve all kinds of different things. But it's funny though, we say how can it be adapted? Sometimes it can be very similar things that I do with children that I could do with adults, and sometimes it's not that anything really needs to be adapted as such. It's a very similar process. When I did my play therapy training, creative arts training, we did all of the different kind of interventions ourselves as adults, learning on that course that we would then offer to and work with the children in. So, we would do a big painting to express a certain emotion, or create like a visual representation of our journey, our life so far, or a particular time in our life. Using clay to create a sculpture that expressed something. The same kind of prompts and ideas and activities that we'd use with children can be used with adults too. And sometimes I think it's more about supporting adults to kind of get over that barrier and that boundary of like, oh, this feels childish, or this feels like out of our comfort zones, because we don't give ourselves permission to be creative and expressive in the way that children do. Children don't have those same barriers quite often that they will. You offer them some blank paper and some paint, and they'll just be like, they'll just be all over it. Whereas, if you were to do the same thing with an adult, they would be like, oh, I don't know, I'm not very good, I can't, I'm not a painter, or I give them a pen and paper, like, well, I'm not a writer, and they worry about those things. And I think one of the biggest ways that creative therapy needs to be adapted for adults is to kind of support them in stepping over those barriers to creativity, and supporting them to sort of build confidence in their ability, and kind of teaching them as well that it's not about like ability, it's about expression. We're not aiming to create something really beautiful and to go in a gallery. We're getting our feelings out, like it's messy, like that's okay.
I was going to say, sort of becoming a kid again.
Yeah, absolutely, giving yourself permission to do that. And again, going back to that, what I say about inner child work that I do, it's sometimes we didn't even have that as children. A lot of children don't necessarily have that freedom to express and to get messy and to be creative in that way. And sometimes it's kind of gifting that to ourselves now as adults, or gifting ourselves the ability to return to it, whether it's something we know or something new. It's giving yourself the opportunity to be childlike and to enjoy that. Yeah,
I think that's like so cool. So when I was at uni, you've just mentioned it, like when you was on your course, you got to take part in like the clay, everything like that. It was the same at uni when I was studying sports. You get to get involved in all the sports sessions, and it was something. It's just a big release. So you're having fun, and once you see it working, it's definitely easier to deliver. It's definitely easier to deliver. So yeah, 100%. So last question of the day. It's from James. He says, do you have any plans to write any books to do with boys, or like younger teen boys, to show it's okay for them to show emotion? I guess coming from my point of view, it's something that, that's why I started Impactivity. Obviously I want to support everyone with their mental health issues, but for me, it was from my personal journey. So being told as a young teen, to be this big shoulder to cry on, and there's not a lot out there. Yes, there's a few role models coming out, I guess, now, but there's not a lot out there to say, hey boys, like, it's okay to talk. So is that something that you've looked at, or is that something that some people that you've worked with are looking at?
Yeah, I think yeah, I really hear you then, and that's huge. And that's I work with a lot of young boys, and that's such a common theme. And you know, they grow up with that. It's so ingrained in our culture, isn't it? That you know,
Hmm.
boys don't cry, you have to be strong. That yeah, boys don't show emotions unless it's anger. Anger's
Hmm.
generally okay. That's seen as
Yeah.
acceptable because it's that strong, powerful,
Hmm.
manly emotion, right? And it's so damaging and so toxic. And there's a lot of that we need to sort of work on undoing. And like you said, there are role models now coming out, which is brilliant, and you can count yourself among that, which I think is
Oh, thank
amazing.
you. Thank you.
So important. I think boys need that more than ever. You know, it's I sit here as a woman talking to teenagers or to children about, you know, it's okay to speak about your emotions, but you know, it hits different when it's coming from a man. You
Hmm.
know, when they can have that role model, it's completely different. And I think that's so important. So yeah, do I have plans to write anything about this? I mean, I have plans to write about like pretty much every topic you could think. I have, you know, I have notebooks everywhere full
Yeah.
of ideas and half-written stories and things. And actually, yeah, a story for boys and that kind of addressing that kind of toxic culture is
Hmm.
is is one of my ideas actually. One of the things that I want to explore. Um, but yeah, after you told me this question was coming up, I had a look for a couple of my books that I'm aware of that are already addressing that and doing a good job of that. And I wrote them down so I could share with you
Perfect.
a couple. Um, there is one by someone called Keith Negley, which is called Tough Guys Have Feelings Too. These are all children's books, so they're
Hmm.
sort of, you know, the picture books, cartoon books for
Yeah, yeah,
young boys. So Tough Guys Have Feelings Too by Keith Negley. And then there's a writer called Shelley Becker who's written two books, superhero themed, which I like,
there you go.
called Even Superheroes Have Bad Days and Even Superheroes Make Mistakes. So again, like normalizing that and
Hmm.
showing that you know, you can be strong and powerful and also experience a whole load of emotions and also
Yeah,
be imperfect and make mistakes.
yeah.
And there's a really beautiful book by Brittany Wynn Lee called The Boy with Big Feelings, and that's about a little boy who's very sensitive
Hmm.
and his sort of struggle with that, and
Yeah.
again, like acknowledging that, accepting that, and that being okay and being a positive thing. Which
Yeah.
again, we celebrate sensitivity in girls quite often, but we don't in
Hmm.
boys,
No.
and we should. And that's a lovely book that kind of that looks at that. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
they'd be a couple of recommendations to have a look at. So you do
oh,
get some book recommendations.
there we go. No, I like that. I like that a lot. And I think that's really important. You know, something that obviously if I'd have read it, you know, it probably puts me in a different place. And
Mm,
I think that, like you said, I think we need to celebrate sensitivity more in men.
yeah,
Too many
absolutely.
times people or men themselves are laughed out of situations when they try and open up to someone as
Hmm.
well. And,
Hmm.
you know, that's why I'm trying to do so much work with, you know, telling my story across the country or wherever to try and normalize it. And
Hmm.
there's too many times people have laughed me out of situations or conversations where if
Hmm.
I'd have had that conversation, I probably wouldn't have had problems going on further. So I
Hmm.
think getting that ingrained in younger children so they know
Yeah,
it's okay to cry. And if, in fact, if any younger kids or teens are listening right now, it is a huge sign of strength to be able to open up. If anything, that makes you even stronger. It's
absolutely.
brave, it's courageous. And I
Hmm.
think, you know, people like you, myself, all these people in the mental health field who are encouraging that right now are doing such an important job because for too long, and to be fair, there's probably girls out there as well who have been told to
Hmm.
be, you know, strong and you can't show your emotions. So
Hmm.
anyone listening who has been told that, like, I know it's hard to change,
Hmm.
but know that it is a huge sign of strength to be able to have those conversations.
Definitely. Yeah, it's just finding the safe spaces to do it. I think that's
Yeah,
the really important thing. Like you said, you know, you
100%.
have these experiences of, yeah, people who maybe are too uncomfortable themselves and can't hold it,
Hmm.
but it's finding the people, whether it's friends or professionals or whoever, that you can do that with. And
Yeah,
perhaps, yeah, like I said at first, just starting with yourself, like just
yeah.
writing it. No one else has to see it. Like get
Hmm.
comfortable yourself with how you feel first if you can, and reach out when you feel ready. But yeah, really, really
100%.
important.
100%. So before we go, obviously, I'm pretty sure people will already be ordering your book online. They're buying it on Amazon. But if people want to get involved with Sophie's stories, how can they find you? And if they want to get involved in your workshops, how can they do that, I guess?
Yeah, so my website is www.sophiesstories.co.uk. So you can find pretty much all the details on there. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and it's at Sophie Stories with the number 1 on the end. And yeah, email me. I'm info@sophiesstories.co.uk if you want to get in touch and have a chat about anything I might be able to support with or any questions. I'm always happy to connect with people and find ways to support. And yeah.
Perfect. So for those of you, if you can't grasp finding someone on social media, Sophie's Stories is tagged, I think, a fair few times on my page over the last few weeks, so you'll be able to find all of the information on there as well. From me, Sophie, thank you for joining us for the first ever episode of A Conversation With. It's been amazing. So for those of you who are listening, you can find us on Spotify and YouTube. That is where the podcast will be released, hopefully by the end of the week, if my editing skills are good. And then, yeah, Impactivity Talking Without Limits on social media, you'll find us. Until then, thank you for joining in. And Sophie, once again, thank you. And yeah, stay safe, speak soon, and enjoy.